Welcome back to the Practical Family Podcast. I am Jen Bryant, and today I've got a returning guest on. She is a sweet friend of mine. I just spent time with her in the mountains recently.
So fun.
At Writing at the Red House. Kathi Lipp, owner of The Red House and her own plethora of writings. You've written so many books by now, Kathi, and your new one, Ready for Anything, is coming out very soon. So
yeah,
we are ready for this book for sure.
I know the timing's a little crazy.
And if you're listening right now after coronavirus time, just know that we've all gotten through this together, and we've all just lived through this crazy, crazy time of social isolation, of wearing the masks, and all this kind of just hit us out of nowhere. But now, Kathi has had this book planned since before that.
Way
This
before. Yeah.
even went down. How did this happen, Kathi? Where did your emergency planning vibes come from?
Jen, it is the silliest story ever. So for my 50th birthday, my husband and I, we were planning actually a European vacation, and work stuff just got all twisted up in it and we couldn't do it. So we ended up going to Canada for a couple of weeks, and I love Canada. So I was super excited to get to go there. And I was in charge of booking all the Airbnbs. Well, I made a couple of mistakes. One, I booked our entire vacation at the same time as Canada's 150th anniversary of being a country. And so, there wasn't a lot of options there. I had no idea that I was doing that. But it was such a fun time to visit. So it was a happy accident. But two, all the Airbnbs I chose to get booked at, none of them had a washer or dryer. And so I had to figure out how to wash our clothes. By the way, we needed to do our clothes pretty often because we only brought like a carry-on suitcase and a backpack. We were going to be, going on trains, planes, and automobiles. So we needed to make sure that we could just pack our stuff up. So we needed to figure out how to wash our clothes. So I was in these really old, ancient laundromats a lot. And so one of the things I did, I always like to learn new things. So I started Googling, how can you do your laundry without a washing machine? And it took me to all these prepper websites. And Jen, it freaked me out. I have to tell you, like, they were talking about having 10 years worth of food and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is so not my bag. But it was really interesting to kind of read through some of the stuff and realize that if there was an emergency, I wasn't prepared at all. Like, I was anti-prepared. And I just, as I started to do a little bit more research, I thought, okay, there has got to be something between 0 and 10 years of canned beans. Like, there's got to be a reasoned response to this. And so as Roger and I started to talk about it and started to plan for ourselves, we thought, maybe other people would be interested. And there was, like, whenever I discuss it, there was one of two reactions. A couple of people were like, okay, well, I'm just going to trust God. I'm like, okay. And then, but almost everybody else I talked to said, I need to know how to be better prepared, but I'm totally overwhelmed by it. And so I'm like, okay, those are the people I can talk to. Those are the people who know they want to be prepared. They don't think it's not trusting God, but they feel overwhelmed by the concept. That's how it all came about.
Wow. So it's really, you were empathizing with that person who just saw what other people were doing or could do to prepare for the worst. And prepper, when you talk about preppers,
I know.
you're talking about like doomsday preppers,
Right.
right?
They're like these websites, I would not suggest hanging out there for your own mental health on most of them. Some of them are okay, but most of them are pretty much the 10 years of baked beans category.
Okay.
And so here's how I feel is, like, when you read my book, I say this: 95% of it is common sense and 5% of it just feels weird. But that 5% you do because it really could help in an emergency. But 95% of it is just common sense. But it's all laid out in a way that you can do it in very doable steps.
Yes, and that's what I loved about flipping through the book. And then when I went to each section that was, I mean, because you don't just do broad categories, you do categories that are incredibly practical. You talk about things like, of course, food, but then
Mm-hmm.
you talk about backing up electronics. Like, oh,
Right.
yeah, I need to know
Yeah.
how to do that.
As someone who had her laptop stolen out of a very swanky hotel, but because my laptop was actually ready for anything, my laptop was more prepared than I was. Let's just be super clear, because I'm married to techie guy. But he just did three very simple things. He said, okay, well, it's password protected. It has Dropbox, so it's backing up constantly, and we have a password manager. Just those three things. When my computer got stolen, nothing bad happened except for losing the computer, which the hotel's insurance paid for. So I was without a computer for a little while. I had a backup computer because, again, married to techie guy, but I only lost 2 documents, and they were just brainstorming things that I'd never saved. That's being ready for anything. And so, and I know people who have, lost entire manuscripts on their computers. And that's not going to happen to me because we've got these few basic things in place. So yeah, it touches on every area of our lives.
Oh, it really does. It really does. And you give the bullet points, but then you
Mhm.
also have examples of like how to, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Um, yes, and I love that you have bullet points, but you also give very real examples of like here's how to cook with canned foods, or
Yeah.
here are the things you need in your first aid kit as recommended by um, the
The Red Cross and
American Red
CDC.
Cross.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you follow CDC guidelines, you follow
Hmm.
Red Cross guidelines, and now that we're in a time of preparing ourselves for these medical emergencies and cleaning and all of that, I'm finding that a lot of families are realizing, wow, we're spending a lot of time indoors right now
Hmm.
because of coronavirus. Let's rethink how we use our space. So here comes all of the things that you've done with decluttering at Clutter Free.
Yeah.
And when you talk and Ready for Anything about prepping those spaces for storage, that's what hit me the hardest, because I look
Mm.
around and I go, do I have am I making extra space to store my food, to store the
Mm.
water, all the water we need to have in case we don't have access to water? These are hugely important things.
They really are. And they're actually easier. And I know so many people who want a decluttered life, who want to live more simply, who want to be able to focus on things in their family. And this all lines up. I mean, it really, really does. And so I really feel like one of the things that's going to come out of all this COVID-19 is that we are going to start to value space more than stuff. That, the opportunity to have some open spaces in our homes and have a corner that our kids can curl up in with a book, or a place where we know where our emergency kit is. We know where our water storage is. Those things are going to become more important to us than having 1,800 choices of what we're going to wear that day.
Mm-hmm.
And, we only choose the same 14 things over and over and over again. It's just how we live. But, this is going to be the great alignment of our principles and our purpose. And I see it happening in the way people are talking with each other, what they're doing. And it's such a hard situation and a great opportunity at the same time. There's a lot of ands with this. It's a really hard situation, and it's an opportunity for our families to come together. It's a lot of ands.
I love that. And how divinely appointed has a lot of this been in our opportunity to not only spend more time with family and just getting used to that, but you even planning to write this book, Ready for Anything, was way before. This was in the works a year ago, before any of this came down. So
Right. It's actually been in the works for 2 years now. And it's so interesting how it all happened. And Jen, it was so funny. There was a bidding war for this book. There were a lot of publishers who wanted it. But one of the publishers I took it to, who I really thought would be interested, put in a bid, but it was a very low bid compared to everybody else. And they said, people only plan for an emergency when they're in an emergency. And I thought, yeah, but when is somebody not in an emergency? And it's not that the same people are in an emergency all the time, but we look at Houston. We look, I mean, Jen, let's talk about Hawaii. Hawaii, where,
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of three things right now, and I'm sure you could think of a million more. COVID, and then there was that fire that wasn't too far away from you. And
Mm-mm.
then there was the accidental emergency remind me what happened there. It was like a code something.
It was a missile warning.
Right. That was what it
Literally
was. Yeah.
on a Saturday morning, we had a missile warning come in on all of our phones that basically said, "This is not a drill." Like, talk about memories, or not memories, but just even studying things like Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
This is not a drill, that we're
Right.
being bombed right now. This is not a drill. A missile is going to come and hit us. And we had 30 minutes, really less than that, 20 minutes to freak out,
I was
basically.
going to say to what,
And
and it's
nothing.
like,
We
yeah,
couldn't. And yeah, so no time. So at the very least, and what we find out later, that if a missile were to have hit, the radius of nuclear radiation and whatnot, we could have stayed in home, in our house. We had to have stayed in our house. So that would have meant that we would need to have every provision inside our house already,
right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing. Nobody wants to think about it, but can I tell you, there is peace in, let's talk about COVID-19. I'm in California, and I'm sure it was the same everywhere. People were rushing to the stores and they didn't know what to do. So they bought toilet paper. And I don't blame anybody for buying toilet paper. Now, I do blame the people who got the 6 Costco size packs. But because we were not given clear instructions by the government, because the government didn't know what was going on for most part, what do you do in a panic? You buy water and toilet paper. So that's what people were doing. But here's the beautiful thing, because we're ready for anything, I didn't have to do that. I went to the store, I got a few things, because we're actually not even sheltering in place at our house. We're sheltering in place at my mom's house. And so it was, we're sheltering in place, not in our place. And so we were able to go get a few things, but we didn't have to panic because we were prepared. And that's what I want for everybody. So whether the emergency is a shelter in place or somebody in your house has lost their job, to be basically prepared uh, will help you even with 2 weeks worth of food. If you lose your job, that's 2 weeks worth of groceries you don't have to buy. That is 2 weeks worth of decisions you don't have to make. And so that's where being prepared can help in almost any circumstance.
Amen. Amen. Speak to the concept. I know that you said there are two types of people: the let's just trust God with
Hmm.
anything, don't do anything, trust God, and it's overwhelming, I can't start.
Right.
The I'm not gonna lie, the trust God part does come up in my mind a lot, because I am a woman of faith. I do
Right.
trust the Lord.
Yeah.
It is something that we need to give to Him. But to not do anything is wrong for a few different reasons. You mentioned, the peace that comes when we do prepare, but what else do we need to be prepared for? Not just ourselves?
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting. I'm just going to trust God. But uh, there's an old expression that I love. It says, trust God and tie up your horse. It just means God has given us a brain to use common sense. So everything in my book is, people think it's really extreme, like 2 weeks worth of food. I don't think anybody thinks that anymore. I think everybody is now on that page. But when I was writing this book, my team members were like, a gallon of water every day for everybody in your house. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, Kathi, isn't that a little extreme? I'm like, okay, these are not Kathi guidelines. These are American Red Cross guidelines. This is the minimum we're supposed to be prepared in the United States. But I also like to think about it this way. When we lived in San Jose, we just sold our house there. But 3 out of 4 of our adult kids live within walking distance. It's a long walk, but walking distance of our house. Now, if you have to be sheltering in place, are you going to shelter in your place in your 20 something room that you've rented? or are you going back to mom and dad's house? You're going, I knew we would have 3 kids landing on our doorstep. So think about this. When you're in an emergency, who are you likely taking care of? So we were thinking about that. So it's me and Roger and our 3 kids. But then also we have an elderly neighbor there. And I know that there's no way we would not be sharing food and resources with her. And so it's having to think along those lines, like, who do I need to be prepared for? And it's not just us, it's for our neighbor. And I believe that that's biblical.
Yeah.
That to be able to say, you know, I would not want to go to my neighbor and say, don't worry about it, just trust God. That's not an adequate response in a crisis. An adequate response is being the hands and feet of Jesus. So this whole, I'll just trust God. Yes, I trust God and I prepare because he's given me a head and a heart of wisdom. And I am concerned for my neighbor. And it's not the survival of the fittest. This isn't the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
This is Christ walked out hands and feet.
Amen. Amen. We survive to serve our community. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Love it. When you mentioned the gallon of water thing, I just had something happen to us yesterday. So the family and I went out to one of the beaches that we still have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband's a surfer, so he takes the gallon of water or some kind of empty tub to wash his feet off from the sand before he gets in the truck when we come back from the beach. So we had 2 big gallons yesterday for our family of 4 to wash our little sandy feet off before we got back in the truck. And when you said, gallon of water per person, I'm like, yeah, because in the book you talk about water to drink, but also water for hygiene and bathing.
Right.
And if we use close to 2 gallons of water just to get the sand off and not our whole bodies, what else do you think, you're going to need it for if all of those amenities are cut off?
Right. And here's the other thing to think about, Jen, is emergencies rarely happen in ones. I thought about this. So our house in the mountains, we can't get to it right now because it's snowed in. And we lost electricity up there. We were able to get to it, but we couldn't get our car. We had to hike into it. And so you think about this. If you lost power, now we have a generator, but it ran for 7 days. And we were out of power at the end. That means not only do I have nothing to heat water with except for our wood stove, but I also have no washing machine and dryer. And so, fortunately, we have a little mechanism up there. It's a little tub that you can wash clothes in. But most people don't have that. And they're going to be resorting to a bucket and a scrub brush and things like that. And so thinking about the water that you need for that even. So, and then you think about your pets and you think about bathing. If you're, we're all going to be doing a lot with wipes. Let's just put it that way. And, it really does add up. And when water does not come out of your tap, water becomes very, very important. So to think about that, yeah, your 2-gallon example is a great example.
Yeah, it's just made it very real. A lot of things lately have been made so super real for us that we couldn't have imagined, but I also can't imagine all of the wonderful things that are going to come out of this in experience for the family. And so just a little bit of background for listeners. When I was with Kathy up at the Red House earlier this year, it was myself and about 7 or 8 other writers. And so Kathi helps to train us in our writing, in pitching book proposals and all of that. And so launching her new book, Ready for Anything, she's training us in the midst of launching her own book. So Kathi is one of the most generous people I've ever met, especially in this author, writer, speaker world, because she really pours into her audience. And she's training us and at the same time trying to launch this book or get it ready for launching. And she has this idea that she pitches to me. What if we provided a curriculum for homeschool families? And I said, that would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
We could do that. So basically, Kathi gave me permission to help put together this amazing curriculum.
I love that you
From
think
her
I
book.
gave you permission. Oh my
Stop it.
goodness. Are you kidding?
Stop
You
it. You let me
incredibly
work with
talented women. Oh my goodness. No, no, no. It's an amazing resource. And who knew that we would all be homeschoolers by the time, a month out? It's just
you. Nobody.
amazing.
I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, okay, yeah, no, I've got that experience, as a homeschool mom. I'm happy to help Kathi, but again, the divine appointment of we are all forced to educate our children right now, whether we like it or not. But we wanted to make this very, of course, practical. And this being practical family, I feel like God prepared me even for this time for all of these reasons too. But what we did was we created this curriculum based on Kathi's book. So all of these concepts come straight from Ready for Anything, okay? So this curriculum is called We're Ready for Anything, to help you get your family ready and treat this like a unit study, guys. Okay, homeschool moms, we love unit studies. We love it when a topic has been just put in one bucket for us to pull from, right? So getting ready for anything basically will take you through just 5 days. You can start and finish this thing in 5 days. You can do it longer if you like, but it's basically focusing on the water, food, first aid, money, and power issues when you plan for a crisis or disaster. So Kathi is offering this entire booklet. This is like 20, and it is
26 pages.
Yeah, 26 pages long. It's a full-on unit study resource for you, and she's offering it to you for free when you pre-order Ready for Anything. And this is by, I think, April 7th. You said it.
Well, April 7th is the ebook, and then if you want the actual physical book, you can get it by May 19th. Along with the unit study, you also get 7 chapters that I felt like were the most important chapters of Ready for Anything that you get along with it. So, but yes, you'll get that curriculum right away. So anytime, if you order it before May 19th, you'll get all of this. So we wanted to give like hundreds of dollars away of free stuff. If you order, the ebook's only $9.99. The physical copy of the book is $18.99. It's a hefty book, but we wanted it to be so worth it. So we've got all sorts of goodies that go with it.
Oh, all sorts. Yeah, and that's not all. That's not all. Wait, there's also Kathi's cookbook, Cooking in a Crisis, and this is a beautifully put together cookbook. But it's got so many easy recipes, even from stuff that's probably already in your freezer or your cabinet. We talk about shelf stable foods and everything. So easy meals to make. And don't we all need this as a homeschool fan, as any family, really, any practical family needs a quick go-to guide for recipes for any night of the week. And so Kathi's giving that away, the curriculum, the 7 chapters of the book, a beginning to one of her clutter-free e-courses. You get all of that stuff when you pre-order Ready for Anything. And families, you are going to want to keep this book on your shelf for a long time. I mean, this is going to be an evergreen resource for you and your family, and getting your kids involved in planning for crisis mode will be invaluable. I'm telling you right now, we're going to start jumping in and even fill up some of our time here at home with getting the kids to think about these really important topics.
And Jen, what I love about this is we're giving kids a sense of control in a very uncontrolled time, to say there are things that you can do to help our family. And so we're going to work on all of this together.
Absolutely. There you go. That's all you need, parents. Well, thank you, Kathi, for visiting. Visit her at kathilipp.com, and kathilipp.com/RFA is the Ready for Anything site. So you'll find out everything you need to know there. There's a lot of shareable resources there to pass the word along, and you'll have the opportunity to go through this book together as a family with other families. So take advantage of this today.